So I just want to thank everyone for joining today on episode 1 of A Chef's Journey Through Alexander Valley. This episode, we are featuring Cabernet Sauvignon, and we hope you enjoy the episode, and you'll follow us throughout this 6-episode series on our expedition of food and wine throughout the Alexander Valley appellation. We have an incredible group of panelists today, and I'm thrilled to introduce our guest moderator for the day, Miss Amanda McCrossin. Amanda is a sommelier, media personality, wine educator, and creator/host of the Instagram and YouTube channel SOMMVIVANT. As a frequent speaker, personality, and contributing writer, in 2018, she was named a Wine Enthusiast Wine Star nominee for Sommelier of the Year and has been featured by numerous publications and media outlets, including SOMMTV, Food Network, Wine Enthusiast, Somm Journal, Food and Wine, World of Fine Wine, and Wine Spectator. That was a breathful. Wow. And she now has a new podcast, which we are incredibly excited about, Wine Access Unfiltered. And so without further ado, I'm going to let Miss Amanda McCrossin take over from here.
Thank you. Wow, that was a mouthful. I definitely would have edited that down if I knew you were going to say the whole thing. But wow, that's really fun to hear. Thank you so much, Lisa. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm especially thrilled to be here with 4 wonderful human beings who represent the Alexander Valley in northeastern Sonoma County, which, if you've ever been there, is just a breathtaking place to drive around. It's my favorite place to catch a sunset in Northern California. It is a majestic and compelling valley with a strong focus on conveniently Cabernet Sauvignon, which we're going to be tasting a bit of today. It is a region that's home to a community of wine growers and winemakers who share generations of family history, traditions, and experience working the land in this world-class wine growing region. The Alexander Valley is an area of diverse and ancient soils. I'm sure we'll be diving into some of those tonight. And built on traditions steeped in farming culture, wines from this appellation are produced with a focus of a sense of place. Again, something that I really look forward to highlighting today during this conversation. The goal for this series is that guests, you guys, are going to walk away with a greater understanding of not only the wines, but the restaurants and their way of life. So we have, in addition to 3 great people from the wine side of things, we also have a chef with us today. So I think we should kick it off with some wine. I've got 2 glasses in front of me. Hopefully you guys sitting at home also have some wine as well. So without any further ado, let's kick it off with Jake Hawkes from Hawkes Wine. And I'm going to grab my wine. So Jake, tell me what wine, even though I already know, tell me what wine we're drinking today. You are muted. There you go.
As far as I know, we're drinking the 2016 Alexander Valley Cabernet Sauvignon.
You nailed it. First question out of the gate. Right.
Yeah, and I'll talk a little bit about. Should I just talk a little bit about my family's business and then a little bit about the wine itself?
I would love to. This is my first experience with your wine, and I'm so excited that it's going to be with all of these great people. I tasted it earlier, but give me the story. How did this all happen?
Well, my folks came to Alexander Valley in 1971, and they planted the vineyard I grew up on that year. They tore out the prune farm that was on it, planted Cabernet in the southern end of Alexander Valley on Chalk Hill Road, and then bought another small piece of property about 5 miles north a year later and did the same thing there. And we farmed Cabernet in Alexander Valley for 30 years before we started making our own wine. So from the 70s into 2002, we were farming and selling to people, mostly in Sonoma County, but a little bit in Napa too. Everybody from jug wine to people making $100 bottles of Cabernet. And when we started making our own wine, we really approached it as farmers making wine. And that's still the way I look at it now. My interest is to be making wine that represents the vineyards that they come from, and I hope that that's reflected in the wine. We don't use very much new oak, we don't fine, we do minimal filtration, and I want the wine and they're 100% varietal. So blending is not a big thing for us either, to be frank. The wines are meant to just be simple and direct and delicious.
Yeah, well, it's definitely delicious. A real a brightness to this wine, something that feels California kissed, but there's such a great lift to it. You say it's 100% Cabernet Sauvignon. Is there a particular clone that you're utilizing in its entirety, or do you want to talk about the soil
Not
bit?
really. I mean, I don't think a lot about clones in Cabernet Sauvignon. I mean, at least I should say that when we started out, I didn't. I do a little bit now, and this is all clone 8, but I view that as more or less a coincidence. I mean, these are all plantings that I inherited from my dad, and I know that he didn't care about clones. I know that he cared about rootstocks, and they're all hillside, and they're all fairly, if not decrepit vineyards, definitely late in life and low producing. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to go off on that too far because I think I'm just going to lose everybody.
Uh-oh. Well, I'm actually curious. What is the oldest vine on the property? Is it the ones that were planted in the 70s?
Yeah, we've got some stuff that goes back to the 70s, but mostly not. Most vineyards in California across the board died in the 1990s. And I remember most of our early stuff, most of our old stuff is stuff actually now is stuff that I worked replanting when I was in my late teens. So most of our older vines are stuff that's 30 years old. And we've got a little bit of crap dating back to the 70s, but it doesn't do very much.
No, you don't think it's held up over the years?
No, I don't. I mean, I'd be interested to hear what Chris has to say about it, or anybody else for that matter. But I don't necessarily think the older the vines, the better the fruit.
Okay.
What do you think, Scott? Older the vines,
What do I
the better
think?
the fruit?
I would agree. I think it's, I do think it's clonal. I do think it's site specific. So, but age is one of those things that, it's just vineyard dependent. It's,
Jake, you're a generational farmer. I mean, this has been your second generation, I assume. What has changed over the years? What's been some of the most dramatic swings from when your parents started to now?
Well, to be frank, I think that the bar has really been raised in terms of the quality of Alexander Valley wines and the approach that winemakers take to making wine in Alexander Valley. My dad, was obsessed with the idea of making great grapes. And I think to a large extent, from an economic point of view, to his detriment. We were producing Cabernet at 2 and 4 tons to the acre. And we did that whether or not they went into a single vineyard Cabernet or whether or not they went into a jug. That's my dad. He's a terrible he's a good farmer and a terrible businessman. And I don't think that there was a market for the quality of fruit that he was interested in producing in Alexander Valley at that time. There were a few trailblazers who I think really were focused on quality, but mostly not. And it's that kind of lack of interest in making widespread, I should say, like really widespread and culturally embedded interest in making great wine was one of the things that motivated us to transition from just farming grapes into making wine ourselves. But I think if you look at things now, the bar has really been lifted, ability to produce that quality in the vineyard and in the winery that didn't exist when I was a kid. And that's great.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great thing. And I think it's something that the wine country in Northern California sees as a whole. It's wonderful that the wine is produced on hillsides. I wonder how that is to farm though.
They're difficult to farm. And it's hard to know what motivated I wasn't responsible for the purchase of any of these vineyards. All 3 of these places were places that if I had to say, I would guess that my parents probably walked to the highest point on the property and said, man, that's a beautiful view. And then decided that they wanted to farm it. And, yes, hillside and exposure and soil has a lot to do with producing great wine. And it's difficult to farm. I don't know. This is a really difficult time to be farming grapes in Alexander Valley. And to me, when I think about wine and when I think about agriculture in Alexander Valley, what I want to see is a way forward. So I don't know whether if I'm going to be grateful to be farming grapes on hillside or if I'm going to be crying because I can't find anybody to pick them in another 20 years. Time will tell.
Yeah. Well, the grapes and the wine speak for themselves. Once you get into the winery, you mentioned not a ton of new French oak on here. So what is happening to this wine?
You mean how do we make it?
The vinification process.
We've got 3 different vineyards in Alexander Valley, and they span probably about 10 miles from the Jimtown area, which is kind of the middle Alexander Valley, down to Chalk Hill Road. which is south of the main valley. I would imagine that most people who are tuned into this tasting have at least some familiarity with Alexander Valley, but just to set the scene a little bit, it's a long, narrow kind of north-south running valley, and it lies parallel to the north side of the Napa Valley, and we farm 3 different vineyards on the southern end of it. And they comprise a total of about 70 acres or so, and in a given year, we'll make probably 2 dozen different lots of Cabernet off the 3 different vineyards put together. So we'll pick in small lots, we'll crush, we'll go to tank and ferment, and then go to barrel with those lots separately. And then over the course of the year, we'll taste through them and combine different lots and sort them and come up with the blend that goes into this bottle. Mm-hmm. But it's all Cabernet. So it's just a bunch of different little lots of Cabernet from the 3 different vineyards mixed together.
When, I mean, I know year to year it changes, but when do you suspect harvest will take place this year?
Oh man, are things early, Chris? I think things are early.
Things are early. So what is the normal harvest date for you then?
Generally speaking, mid-October would be typical. Mm-hmm. And I think we're going to be, for Cabernet, mid-October would be typical, but I think we're going to be a little bit ahead of that. Yeah. And it varies from vineyard to vineyard too.
Yeah. It's a graceful wine. I mean, we talked about brightness and freshness. There's a youthfulness to this, but it's also very graceful. There's a softness that feels, like I said, kind of sun-kissed, but also like a little bit reserved. I don't know if you're drinking this alongside of me, but I'm really enjoying just for a hillside wine. It's got a lot of power, but it also has this really beautiful femininity to it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I have to say, I feel like one of the problems in California Cabernet over my tenure as a farmer and winemaker doing this for a living has been that I feel like it's everybody kind of is making wines that exist or too many people, I should say, make wines that exist in the pursuit of the same ideals of power and, powerful color and extraction and heavy tannin. And I think that, to me, it's interesting and more compelling to make wines that have a sense of individuality and that have a consistent character that speaks to the house on an annual basis, rather than trying to just make something that's as big and dark and tannic as I possibly can.
Yeah, well, I think you've succeeded for sure. And for what it's worth, as many times as I've driven around Alexander Valley, especially at dusk, there is this sort of bouquet de garni, really beautiful floral scent that kind of wafts through the air with like savory undertones, and it has that in spades in this wine. So sense of place for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'll let you sip your wine. And well, actually I should ask you, since we're drinking this wine, where can people find Hawkes and specifically the 2016 Cabernet?
At hawkswine.com.
Beautiful.
We sell almost everything that we do through our wine club and through our mailing list. So yeah, please just look us up on the web or give us a call.
Amazing. Well, I hope people will seek out the wine. We'll let you take a few sips and relax a little bit and move on to Scot Covington of Trione Vineyard. I'm going to grab my my wine here. So we have a 2015, made a 2016 before, 2015 for this Cabernet Sauvignon. Scott, what's going on with this wine? Tell me a little bit about it.
Oh, what's going on with it? I don't know, just ethereal beauty. I don't know. I could describe it all day.
Wild and crazy like you?
This is yeah, hold the comments till the end, please. Now, this is our flagship wine at Trione, and we've been making it since 2005. That was the year I started with them here, and we built the winery in 2008. The Trione family have been growing grapes, since the 70s. I'll let Chris talk a little bit more about that, and I'll talk a little bit more just about this wine in particular. This is our flagship Cabernet. It comes from a block in the northern end of Alexander Valley, and it is just due east of Cloverdale, and it's the very end where the valley closes off again on the north. And this vineyard actually is the farthest to the east, and it's starting to climb up into the Mayakama there, and so it's deep soil, and it's the farthest away from the river, so it's a beautiful block. When I started here, I was looking at different blocks of cab that we have, and we have several selections of cab at different locations in the valley. And this one was a clone called 337 which was a relatively new selection brought into California again in the 90s. And a friend of mine was making wine over in Napa, a guy named Sean Capio, and he was just doing Cabernet exclusively. And we were friends, and I called him and I just said, hey, Sean, you're the one that knows, you know, everything about clones and rootstock and location on cab. What's some of your favorites? And so he kept saying 337. So that's why it came into my mind originally when we started looking at different blocks of cab and which ones we were going to use for our single block, single cab wine. And this one started out that way, and it's just maintained its kind of pedigree throughout the years. So we've been making this wine, like I said, since the beginning.
The block 21, is that the
block
one you're
21? Yeah, it is. It's our block 21 from that northern Cloverdale ranch, and that's as simple naming it as it is. It was block 21. It was a slightly tightly spaced single cordon vineyard, I think planted in the mid to late 90s, and it was mature, and it just, you know, provided beautiful fruit, and Kris can attest to that. It's a beautiful block. It's just we've just maintained this wine ever since. So it is a blend. So it's mainly Cabernet, but it's got a little Merlot, a little Petit Verdot, Cab Franc, and Merlot, Petit Verdot, and Cab Franc. And it spends
also from block 21, or do you blend from outside?
Not from block 21. No. Those sources I used to source them from that same ranch, but we've since planted closer to the winery down here in the central part of the valley, and we've taken some of those Bordeaux varieties and planted them here. So I've been sourcing them from here, probably since about 2009 or 2010.
Yeah. I don't want to compare and contrast these two wines, but you kind of can't help it because they're sitting right next to each other. So we will, for as soft and ethereal, and this wine is ethereal as well, but this wine to me is a little, I think they kind of speak to both of your personalities, if I may. This has like a little bit more, like, it's kind of a wise ass, like it kind of like has a crunchiness and like, just a little more electric, and like, there's something angular about this wine that I really like. It's a crunchy, red berried, fun, vibrant wine. I think it's a little bit more punk rock and metal than the Hawkes was drinking, and I like that quite a bit.
I heard that the camera adds 10 pounds.
Is that true with webcams?
There's only one on here, though. I want you to know there's only one camera.
That's true. How are you making this wine? What is the oak treatment?
This at Trione, I've got 14 open top fermenters, so all the reds get fermented in relatively small 7-ton open top fermenters, and so this gets destemmed, and cab will go through the rollers. It'll get crushed, and then it gets delivered to the tank, and it goes into the open top fermenter, and I do Bordeaux varieties and Burgundian varieties separately, in that Zin and Syrah and Pinot get punched down. This wine and the other Bordeaux varieties get an irrigator on it where it pumps over, kind of like a percolation device, and then it's got an aerator, so it brings in oxygen into the flow of the juice. So I get a lot of oxygenated juice, a lot of percolation through the cap, and that goes on throughout the entire fermentation. And then we drain and press. I've got a basket press. So we're doing traditional techniques of winemaking and trying to, do minimalist, but also traditional methods.
Yeah.
That's the winemaking side. I do inoculate, so I use a certain strain of yeast. Barrel aging, this wine gets 2 years of age in 100% French oak barrels, and a selection of, I think, the highest quality barrels I can get. They're all thin stave, and they're Quintessence, Boisset, and Sylvain barrels. And it's about 40% new oak. So the wine gets racked, I would say maybe 3 times the first year and maybe once the second. And
what do you like? I'll be very curious to see what Chef has to say about food pairings for each of these wines. But what do each of you like to drink with these wines, Jake and Scott?
Drink or eat?
Sorry, eat. Yes. Maybe I've been drinking too much already.
Well, I could eat almost anything with this wine, but I think the things that come to mind to me right now, you know, some of the classic ribeye, just a grilled ribeye, New York, any nice piece of beef.
I'll tell you what I like. I like some smoked ribs with this wine.
Some smoked what?
Ribs,
Oh,
smoked ribs.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to beat the pairing of beef and Cabernet. But I will say too that I like to drink across the spectrum of wine, and I like to eat. I love to cook, and I like to make a lot of different things. And if one of the reasons that I like to keep the acid profile in my wine pretty high is so that it'll pair with a wide variety of different things and stand up to a wide variety of different things. I like it to have, even though it's a Cabernet, I like it to maintain a little bit of lightness.
Sure.
I agree. I think that's also what's so beautiful about Cabernet is it has the ability to sort of span the spectrum, and there are so many great representations, even in just one AVA, that is Alexander Valley. You can have two Cabernets from the same place, and they couldn't be more different. So definitely no homogenization going on here. Scott, I would like to know where people can find this beautiful wine.
Well, we're doing something special because of this event. Our tasting room manager, Jesse, said that we're going to offer 20% off to everybody that wants this wine. And also we've got a couple other Alexander Valley wines, our Henry's Blend, and then our Primitivo that are both from the ranch and both from the valley here.
Nice.
For the next couple of days, we're going to offer 20% off. So you go to our website and enter the promotional code, just put capitalized Trione, and then everyone will get a 20% discount on these wines.
Love it. Who doesn't love a discount? We have a question from Pam Bell. What were the climate conditions in 2015 and 16 that influenced these wines?
Can I answer that?
Yeah.
Because I have my tasting notes right here.
Ooh, perfect.
I was hoping you had them.
And I said, the opinion of many is that 2015 was an excellent, and I'm going to talk about 15, was an excellent vintage, although drought conditions were all that was talked about for most of the year. Early dry conditions led to an early bud break. The growing season was warm, dry, and for most of the period mild. It was an early bud break and a relatively light crop that made 2015 one of the earliest harvests on record. It was certainly the earliest harvest for Trione as we began picking grapes for sparkling August 12th and finished up the last of the Flat Ridge Zin the first week of October. So it was an early year, dry, early bud break, early lighter crop than normal.
Yeah.
So I think the concentration was good.
Jake, do you want to speak to 16 at all?
Not really. I mean, I think there's vintage variation in California, but I don't think there actually is like, I mean, I don't know. There actually, in the last 10 years, there's probably because of climate change, there's been more vintage variation than I was used to. But I remember, if I remember correctly, and maybe Kris will remember more exactly, I remember both these years as being fairly light and fairly hot and fairly early. And you know, I remember thinking at the time that I was tasting the 2015 vintage, which is the vintage of Trione that we're drinking. I remember that really specifically. I remember thinking that it was a very uneven year, that some of the fruit to me looked like it was a little bit green at the time of harvest, or tasted to me like it was a little bit green at the time of harvest. And I associated that in particular with it being an early year. But in the year of 15, and to some extent, this is true of the year of 16 too, I ended up also getting a freshness in those wines and a pronounced high-tone fruitiness that you don't always get in Alexander Valley Cabernet that I really love in the 15 and in the 16 vintage both. So I think they're both pretty warm, pretty early years with a really nice enduring brightness.
Sure, there wasn't overripe because this wine here is 13.9. So, you know, even though
no, certainly not. No. Yeah. And on the contrary, I think a lot of the time we think about, especially in Cabernet, that hang time, as in more time on the vine, is always better. But I do feel like some of the mistakes that I've made as a farmer and a winemaker is maybe in the drought years, you know, 12 and 13 and 14, when we had really dry falls, and we had the ability to just leave the grapes out there as long as we wanted. To some extent, I might be getting into the weeds, but those came on the heels of wetter vintages. 9, 10, and 11 were wetter vintages, and 11 in particular was a dismally cold and wet summer. And we went from that into the years of 12 and 13 and 14, which were drought years. And I think the temptation there was, okay, you've got the dry fall, let it hang, and then leave the grapes there. And they developed amazing texture and tannin. But I think sometimes, at least I have made wines that have great texture and tannin and are really well developed in that respect, but that they lack some of the brightness and the freshness that the 15, 16, 17s I think have.
Mm-hmm. I feel like I may be setting myself up for failure or walking into a trap by asking this question, but I'm going to do it anyway. Do either of you think that there is anything consistently found as far as flavor profile when it comes to Alexander Valley Cabernet Sauvignon?
Do you want to answer? I can answer.
No.
Well, here's my impression with Alexander Valley. The old tradition has been that it was green. You get the bell pepper. There was always a greenish element to Alexander Valley. And that has since changed with all the farmers that are farming a little bit, I want to say with wine in mind. And so that tendency has gone away. I've seen that working here for 15 years in the Valley. When it used to be, you could pick up a glass and go, oh, that's an Alexander Valley Cab. And you can't say that anymore because of the farming, the grape growing, and that, we're planting it in other areas. And so I think that used to be the typical answer for Alexander Valley, but it's not that way anymore.
Okay.
You get really good development, really good fruit flavor.
No, that's great. Maybe as we kick this off to Kris, we can talk a little bit about rootstocks. I don't know if that's something you're wanting to chat a little bit about, but has rootstock played a role in the lack of green that is no longer the green that is no longer existing in Alexander Valley wines?
Are you asking me or asking Kris?
I was going to kick it off to Kris, but you want to answer that?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, I would say the change in rootstocks and just, you're living and you're learning as time passes by. The things that you did in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, you're now seeing the next generation of agriculture and, vineyard in Alexander Valley. So this is a second, third generation of information that we're now getting a handle on viticulture, whereas before we were just planting to cover some ground and produce some grapes. And that it's like Jake talked about what his father was doing versus what he started doing. So education, and there's a wealth of information on things now. And so we have been able to fine tune the ground that we have and match rootstocks to the ground and the soil profile and things like that. I'll plant something different up in Cloverdale versus what I would down in Russian River or even simply in Geyserville, in between the two. But I think there is there is something to the changes in rootstocks and the clonal. Everything is matched with clone, rootstock, and soil. And if you can ace that, you've hit a home run. But a lot of trial and tribulation goes into that.
One question we have, Jake, for you is asking, when do you decide when to pick?
Well, I'd be lying if I said that we decide when to pick based exclusively on flavor in the field. I don't do that because I feel like sometimes I can get exhausted enough at time of harvest that my mind plays tricks on me. And I do look for a combination of, I try to combine numbers that I get from crushing grapes and testing them, acid and sugar and pH, combined with what I taste just walking through the vineyard. That's the short answer. Mostly when I like the way it tastes. And I'll just to add one thing that actually is really important to that where Cabernet is concerned. And that is that typically when you're picking Cabernet, if you're picking it in mid-October, it's really different than Pinot Noir or Chardonnay or Sauvignon Blanc, which is harvested a month at least earlier than that and the days are longer and the days are hotter, and things will change really dramatically over the course of a couple of days. So, I mean, a number of times making Pinot Noir for other projects, not Hawkes, we've had to make the decision about whether or not we're going to pick on Friday and whether, or Monday, and it's made a really dramatic difference. Typically speaking with Cabernet, you're picking when the days are short and the grapes take a long time to change. So usually you can take your time and make a decision.
Scott, did you want to answer that or no?
What, closing remarks? I'd like to make one more remark.
Yes.
Because I spend time doing my tasting notes, and the fact that I have them here in front of me, I'd like to tell you how I describe this wine.
I would love to hear it. Go for it.
The Trione 2015 Block 21 Cabernet is reminiscent of a classic left bank Bordeaux. Silky, cab dominant, but balanced. Textured and lingering on the palate. Aromas and flavors of currant and black raspberry pie are on the mind and on the nose. This wine is age-worthy and will continue to develop for the next 5 to 10 years. But buy it now.
Buy it and hold. I think you did a great job with that. Kris, I'd love to know what's going on in the vineyard right now. We're at late July, almost into August. What are you seeing on the vines?
So right now we're kind of at the veraison. So canopy growth is pretty much where you're going to be for the year. And now veraison is set in the last 14 days, especially the last 10, veraison has hit pretty hard in the Cabernet. So it's a good sight to see, and the weather's definitely cooperating for us. So that has been pretty nice this year. We have had a great growing season so far. The spring started off a little bit really hot, really cold, but if you're in the area, you were, feeling the same thing we were. We had a really hot spring, then a freezing cold spring, and so it kind of bounced back and forth. But for the last 2 months, since May, June, and now into July, 3 months, everything's been phenomenal for growing. So right now, the vineyard's slowing down, the work's slowing down a little bit. We're down to just 40 hours a week. And but right now I couldn't ask for more. We're almost at the waiting phase. So a little more cleanup and pass-throughs here and there, but starting to slow down a little bit.
Yeah. There is a question from Alice asking for more details about environmental differences between the vineyards where these two wines come. Can you speak to that, Kris?
I can't. I don't know exactly where Jake's property is, so I can't. But if I know from just
How dare you?
I know where you're at, but I don't walk the ground. but the hillside versus ours is old. Thousands of years ago, it was a riverbed. We're on the higher side of it. All of our properties go butt up to the Russian River, but we are on the high end of our property where this particular block is. But from hillside and the work that goes into that, ours has a slope of about 0.5%, but it's the ground and stuff is favorable for what we're doing over there. But the work they put in that hillside stuff, it's almost not double the work, but it's pretty close to it.
Jake, would you like to remark?
Well, I do think that where the wines are from informs their basic nature. I mean, I think that all of our 3 vineyards are in the southern half of the valley, and that's the cooler half of the Alexander Valley. And I think that probably has as much to do with the character of this wine as the fact that they're on hillsides. I kind of feel like hillsides is a talking point that everybody wants to use all the time. So I'm less interested in addressing that than I am in the fact that these wines come from a cooler part of the valley, and I think that they're a little bit less ripe than typical Cabernet Sauvignon. And it's so hard. All of my experience and all my life in Alexander Valley Cabernet is dedicated to these 3 vineyards. And if I was from farther north, and if I had grown up growing grapes in the hotter part of the valley, maybe I would have a different view on things. But I like the nuance and the subtlety and the slightly, you could even say, withdrawn character of wines that come from slightly cooler climates. So that's what I grew up with, and that's, as a winemaker, what I've evolved into, and so that's what I like. I love Scott. I love Trione wines. But I feel grateful to be growing grapes in a place where it's comparatively cool. I mean, it's
Yeah.
nerve-wracking, but I think it's essential to what we do.
Well, and I think it's important to note that even within, as we talked about, even within the Alexander Valley, there not only can be style differences, but several microclimates and different soils, and it's not uniform all across the Alexander Valley. Kris, I wonder if you can speak to the different soil types that exist.
Yeah, so I mean, just in our home ranch where I am now, we call it our Nervo Ranch. It's based on just on the south side of Geyserville. So our grounds here are, gravelly loam, but more loam than gravel up here where we're at. But our temperature growing degree days are less than if we went up to Cloverdale, which is only 15 miles up the road and still in Alexander Valley, which is a hotter, drier climate. And we're able to, the plants up there get a little more heat stress and also water stress. So every little piece makes a difference. I have 150 acres we own and manage up in Cloverdale, and I have to treat that different than the stuff I do here in Geyserville.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, different soil types. If you look at a soil map, I have 6-7 different soil types on one property. So it just depends on where you're at. But yeah, like I said, the microclimates make a big difference as well. We can have one section, just in a simple 10 acres, we have one section grow completely different than the other. Yeah, no, it definitely, you have a lot of variability in Alexander Valley. That's one of the beauties of it.
I'm sure it varies from block to block and vineyard to vineyard, but what is your approach in general with water irrigation and versus like dry farming?
I've never dry farmed, so I can't really attest to that. I tend to try and get my canopy in place. And now that we're at the canopy phase, like our full growth canopy phase where I want to be and I'm content and I feel we can ripen our fruit, now I'll start pulling back on my water applications. So instead of, water sets of, depending on the spot, I could go 2 sets of 4 hours or 6 hours a week. Now I'm going to start pulling my back to maybe 1 set or 2 shorter sets of irrigation. But it's really site dependent. I have some stuff that I'll water, overnight. I have some Sauvignon Blanc in a really gravelly section and I need to keep hitting it with water. But then there's other spots like our Block 21 Cabernet, for example. I need to start pulling that back so I can start getting what Scott needs to make his wine out of that. So it's kind of site dependent and grape contract dependent on what we're trying to accomplish. But I work for Vinemark, which is Victor and Mark, and they own Vinemark Vineyards and Trione Winery. We kind of work together to get a great end product. And we do that for everybody, not just them. But there's certain blocks we will put extra thinning passes into or extra leafing and, or start cutting back some irrigation depending on how I know our harvest time works, because I can't just cut all the water when I know we can't pick grapes. But working with Scott is great. But yeah, we work together. And
you don't have to lie. It's okay.
Yeah, no, it is. We have a lot of fun. But
I was going to say, Kris, don't tell them all our secrets.
Yeah, not all of it.
Public.
But we work together. That's the good thing. And I do with all my grower reps and all of our winemakers that we sell fruit to. But the water, it's a tricky one because I have different sites and different strategies for just about everything.
Yeah, we probably need another whole webinar for that.
Yeah, we can go a long way. I could walk you through the Zinfandel strategy, and then the Pinot and the Cab and the Soft Block, the Chardonnays, and we could go down the whole. Yeah, it's a water seminar, irrigation seminar.
Well, we've got a couple questions, but we'll save them for later because I really want to talk to Chef a little bit about some of the dishes that he has come up with for these particular wines. So please, Chef Dino of Diavola, I'm so excited you're here. Diavola, as I mentioned earlier in this, is absolutely one of my favorite restaurants in Northern California. I go there as much as I possibly can. So what do you have for us today?
Today, well, I just kind of, like always last minute, kind of changed it up. I made like lamb roast. Even last night.
Oh man.
There's kind of a picture of it. Scrolling.
That looks amazing.
But I don't know, just even with, what we do at Diavola, just kind of how we pick wines. And we kind of start with the food first and then go from there. Like, oh, what are we gonna drink tonight, or what should we pair with this? But yeah, I drank both the wines last night. I mean, the Hawkes, they were both great. The Hawkes I opened first, but it's perfect. My wife made like this simple, just pasta with like tomatoes from our garden, just basil. I mean, you think like, oh, it's Cabernet, like you need like this huge piece of beef or whatever, but it was even good with that. So it was fun to drink it with everything. But in Diavola too, we have this beautiful ribeye. But today, I don't know, I want to do the lamb. So like here is, and this right here. Anyway.
So what is on top of there? There was like some shaved something, and then what is the sauce that you have on top of it?
So the sauce, I just used a bunch of like tomatoes, like cherry tomatoes. Mm-hmm. We cooked them down with some peppers, some shallots, and that's it. Just some lamb stock that we made from the bones, and just roasted. I mean, this is a dish like I kind of grew up with. One of my uncles used to make this all the time. It was like a big family favorite. He'd like cook orzo pasta like in the sauce after it was roasted. So it's just a fun family meal, like at home. I've been doing a lot of home cooking these days. So,
yeah, I bet. I've had a number of your pizzas from Diavola. Which of the pizzas would you pair with these wines?
Right now I'm drinking Vermentino, but I mean any like Pinot's good. This lamb dish pretty versatile. I mean we're Cabernet. The Zinfandel's good. For me, red wine with this guy. But.
Oh no, sorry. The pizza. What pizza would you pair?
Pizza.
Yeah, you do pizza so well.
Good. I'd say the Sonia pizza probably. It's the best one right now. The Dictator pizza too is pretty good.
I know the Dictator's delicious. That would be good.
Yeah.
That's a staple for me when I go there.
What else are we doing right now? I mean, the salsicha, it's nice to have the acid in the wine. And
yeah, you mentioned you utilize the garden quite a bit, and I think part of this discussion has to do with the fact that Alexander Valley is such a diverse region with many things beyond just wine. The food is incredible as well. What is it like as a chef to work with the agriculture that exists in the valley?
I mean, it's pretty amazing. Like, I've got a couple friends that have, huge gardens. I mean, there's Bernier. Dave Pugh does a great job, Russian River Organics. And I just went out there the other day and saw these beautiful Romano beans he's grown. I was like, dude, I need those. Like, so it's fun we have it. It's like right in our back door, and we talk about how everything's local and raised here, but it's true. I mean, everything is so easy to grow, and just like the wine, I mean, it's shows for itself. I mean, if you make good grapes, I mean, you make good wine. So
yeah,
growing is pretty important, and soil here is great. But yeah, I mean, working with farmers is fantastic.
Is there a season that you think that you prefer to work with more so than another as far as the produce goes? I
like springtime. I mean, all the green stuff is fun. I mean, summertime is fun for about a month, and then you're like, okay, I've had enough of tomatoes and zucchini.
I think it just means you need more cab.
You just like more zucchini than you need. But it's great right now. I mean, peppers are just starting to happen, like the Nardello peppers, eggplants, starting getting those in.
Nardellos is that the Russian roulette ones? The Jimmy Nardellos?
No, Padrones. Those are
Padrones, that's what it is. Jimmy Nardellos are the sweet ones.
The Jimmy Nardellos are great. But yeah, I mean, we're really lucky where we live. I feel it's a pretty special spot.
It's the best.
Right.
Alice is wondering if the lamb is on the regular menu at Diavola.
Lamb, so we used to do like here and there. I mean, we used to do when all this fun pandemic stuff happened. We were doing supper clubs for a while, kind of a meal for four, and this was like one of the ones that was pretty popular. But this is kind of more thing that, I mean, it's a huge lamb leg, so it could be done with like a lamb chop. I mean, you could do like a little miniature version of this, but for a restaurant. But this is, I don't know, kind of something you cook at home.
Yeah. Or just bring a lot of friends and a lot of wine.
Yeah.
And Jen says Dino's pork cheek ragu is amazing. Sonia is my go-to.
That would be, I mean, that's a great dish too. I mean, the spaghettini with the pork cheek ragu. I mean, red wine, you can't go wrong. It's a classic.
Jen is also wondering what you're growing in your winter garden.
Winter garden. I don't know. My wife's glaring at me right now. I don't think we're planning a winter garden.
Uh-oh.
Dino?
Yes, sir.
I had puntarelli at your place, speaking of winter garden,
Yes.
a while ago. Like, that was years ago, and it was delicious, and it turned me on to it, and I started growing it. Where did you get it, and do you still have it on the menu?
Bernier, no. So that's like a early fall and then a springtime. So there's like 2 plantings to that. But it's it's one of those things too. It's hard to grow, but I mean, I love puntarelli. It's like my top, like that, artichokes. It's super bitter, but it's hard. I mean, how did you go? Did you grow it good? Did they come out like the little asparagus shoots, kind of hollow?
They didn't come out like little asparagus shoots. They looked kind of like a cross between radicchio and romaine.
Yeah. Yeah, puntarelli. I mean, Yael grows some Bernier Farms. They have, every once in a while I buy as much as I can. Usually me and Ari fight over it.
A few of you are wondering if the lamb dish recipe is going to be available. Is that a yes from Chef Dino? And Lisa,
yeah, yes, probably next week. I'll probably have to put that on the menu now.
Well,
We will share that recipe.
You can come over to my house, but we get social distance in the garden.
Yes, exactly. All right. Well, I think we're all sufficiently hungry now. So let's answer some of these questions. LaDonna, how long would you cellar a cab to allow it to reach its ultimate best? This is a question that I have been asked more times than I can count. But I think, given that we have 2 particular wines with us today, the Hawkes and the Trione, I'm wondering if either of you have a timeline that you like to enjoy these in, because, wines as they age change tremendously, but is there a time that you prefer to drink them in?
You want to start, Jake?
Sure. I like old wine. My dad.
How old?
Old. Yeah. My dad, who's young, who's old, likes young wine. But I think it's different for everybody, and I think it depends on what you're interested in discovering in the wine. I will drink a wine like this, the one that's in front of us. I will definitely be more interested in it in 10 years from now than I am right now. But when when I started making wine, I was making wine with my dad, and we would pull barrel samples and sit at the table and drink through them and talk about them and argue about them. And then I would leave, and my dad would drink the barrel samples with dinner. So it just really depends. I think, and I don't know, I'd be interested to hear what Scott has to say about this too. I think that this is true in the making of wine also, that you can't improve the wine in any way in a certain respect without taking something else away from it. So it is true that wines gain things with age. Cabernet Sauvignon gains things with age, but it loses things too. It loses fruit. So depends on what you're interested in.
Scott?
Sure. Well, I like to say that I am making wines that are age worthy. We've had like the 2005 Cab that was our first vintage here. We'll go back to it occasionally and go, God, that was really good. So I believe it is a little vintage dependent on good years, make age worthy wines. It's all about, again, acidity and, ripeness. And so as a winemaker, I do want wines to age, and I do love wines after about 5 or 6 years. But having said that, I think the lean years are going to be the years that age longer. So, 11 is tasting great right now. And that was, I think Jake said something about 11 being that year that was really lean and really, a lot of people thought it was unripe and green, but go back and taste those now and they are tasting awesome. And those are going to age for a long time.
And that's a reason not to pick the fruit too ripe, right? To just have that in mind. And and in Cabernet, the issue is that you need to make wines that are drinkable when they're young, and that if you don't, I think one of the strategies that winemakers have taken is to let the grapes get so ripe that they kind of ripen out of the aggressive tannin and acidity that make them difficult to drink in their youth. But you can't do that without having there be some expense to the ageability of the wine too.
For sure.
Yeah. And I think, having worked with a wine list that is very deep in vintages of California wine, coming from New York City, where the general feeling was that California wines were not capable of aging, that it was only the old world. I think what I would like to say is that California wines are more than capable of aging. I've had Alexander Valley wines specifically back to the 70s, and they're gorgeous. And to your point, Jake, yes, do they lose something? Absolutely. Are they bright and full of fruit? No, they lean a little more on the earthy side of things, and they're savory. But you can drink these wines as old as you like, as long as that is the profile that you enjoy. So if you love a big, bountiful bowl of fruit, drink it younger. But if you're someone that wants to wait and loves that savory, earthy undertones, Alexander Valley wines are more than capable of giving you that with a little time.
Sure.
For Trione, what does a heat-stressed vine/grape taste like when it becomes a wine? That's a good question.
What's a heat-stressed grape
Heat-stressed
taste like?
vine/grape. So a vine that, grapes that were in a hot vintage, what does that taste like?
Well, I mean, it depends on the variety, right? But even any variety, in my experience, you cannot make wine from raisins. You're not going to make wine. I mean, if you get the raisin character in the fruit, that does not go away. So I don't know if that answers the question, but if we're approaching a heat wave that we kind of know about, we want to get the fruit to the vineyard.
I think the answer to that question is we hope we don't have to taste a heat-stressed vine/grape, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. This is an interesting question. I'm not sure what it means, but Jake, greetings from your Minnesota wine cellar. Also, Paul and Diane's basement. How is Capone doing? Care to translate?
Capone's my beloved old dog that's sleeping on the floor right here. He's just fine.
Speaking of which, where are the chickens? We had chickens on the trial run of this, and I see no chickens today.
No, the chickens belong to my daughters, and I guess they're taking the evening off.
Wait, Chef Dino, put that back up.
Okay.
What did you have?
Sorry, my sous chef wife just plated this up. That's the lamb.
She sure did. Wow. Oh my gosh.
My staff wants to know what time is dinner and what you're going to do with that huge lamb roast, by the way.
I'm not sure. I guess my parents got to come over. Somebody's got to come over. Jake, what are you doing? Come on, guys.
Well, I think
we're pretty close.
I know. No,
I think if we could all be there, we would.
Winemakers. I mean, Geyserville is great. I just wanted to say it's fun to have these people close by. It's nice that they all share the same passion.
Yeah.
Geyserville is great. It's great.
And so before Amanda closes us off, I just would like to ask Scott and Jake, just remind all of us how we can acquire your wines. Where is the best place to go and get those wines?
TrioneWinery.com, and remember Trione in the promo box.
20% off.
Yep.
20% off?
We're at hawkswine.com. HAWKES. Hawkswine.com.
Thank you. And someone has asked, with the COVID restrictions in California, can we visit the wineries? Are tasting rooms open and are hotels available? What say you?
Yes.
Come and visit.
But come visit.
Yeah. Bring your mask, but come and visit. It's a beautiful time to be in California, specifically in Alexander Valley. Take some time to enjoy the views and the sunsets. Don't put too much on your plate. Make sure you stop at Diavola for dinner. Make sure you visit Hawkes and Trione, but definitely don't pack it all in one day, because there's a lot to see, and it's not just the wines or the food. It is your surroundings as well. So it doesn't end here, guys. This series continues. This goes week to week. I will not be here, but other people will, and they'll be talking about Alexander Valley. So I hope you'll check back in for the future seminars. And to all of our panelists today, thank you so much for joining us and giving us all of your wisdom, sharing your wines and your recipes. Dino will get you that recipe for the lamb, and we will all eat wonderfully after the fact.
It's super easy.
Lisa, did I miss anything?
No, that's great. Yeah, just if you only registered for this episode, we certainly encourage you to register for the remaining episodes. And just know, when you support these Alexander Valley wineries, you're supporting small family business. We are open and we would love to see you. So come on up.
Beautiful. Well, thank you all so much to the panelists and to everyone who joined us today. Thank you on behalf of the Alexander Valley wine growers. We really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you, Amanda. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.